Well, welcome back, members. Perhaps if you're listening to this, you haven't put your screen on, could you put it on so that we can identify that you're all back? Thank you very much. Apologies again for the delay. I'm very pleased to say that the technical issues that we had have now been resolved. It was a problem of screening this through the YouTube. Obviously, we need to make sure that the committee was actually broadcast live rather than just a recording, and so we had to just make sure that we got the message through to YouTube clearly, which is now being resolved. So if I could take members back to page 7 on our agenda papers, this is the planning application which we're looking at this morning, and I'll pass straight across to Lisa Williams, who has a presentation. I think Councillor Hunt, if you let us know if you can't see this, we are making available to you the presentation, I think, by email. Councillor Hunt, before we just go into the presentation, is it on your screen? No, it isn't.
She'll have the same problems.
Right.
It's happened before on my team, so
Right.
I don't know what the solution is.
Well, it's important that you see the presentation, so we will, Danny will email you the presentation so that you can see it at home on a separate, or a link in the chat. Sorry, a link in the chat for you, John, so that you can see the presentation before we come to take a vote on this application. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, Elisa, would you like to take us on from here? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. This planning application is being reported to Planning Committee today due to the level of public interest that has been raised at the time of consultation. There has been a petition submitted opposing the development of the site with a total of 93 signatures. I will just point out before proceeding with the presentation that we are considering a slightly revised version of Condition 3, which is to read as on screen. So it reads, details including phasing of work of the following: highways and footway construction up to the public highway, dimensions and radii, gradients, surface water drainage, street lighting shall be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority prior to works commencing. The development shall be carried out strictly in accordance with the approved details. The land in which this application relates is allocated for housing within the Brecon Beacons National Park Local Development Plan. The site is allocated for 6 dwellings. By way of background, members may recall that the sites next door, currently shown on screen, were brought to August's Planning Committee for decision. There are effectively 3 sites bordering this one, 2 of which comprises of a total of 12 dwellings, with the other comprising a drainage infrastructure to serve all 3 housing sites. The sites are being developed to form one housing estate, but are split into separate applications. Members resolved to approve the applications neighbouring this site. The application site is located in the Level 3 settlement of Pontstickell and comprises a parcel of land measuring 0.46 hectares. The site is allocated within the Local Development Plan allocation under reference CS91 and borders site allocation reference COM-PSTC-A. Just run through. So if you can see my cursor on the screen, the red site here is what or pinky site is what we're looking at here, and the hashed site is the 2 sites next door. The application site is currently accessed via a single track lane from the north, which also provides access to Pontstickell House. The site is predominantly grazing land currently used by horses for grazing purposes. However, the northeast corner of the site currently has a gated entrance with an existing built form with other associated paraphernalia. This application site is to be accessed via the constructed estate road to serve the 3 sites in total, with permeable driveways to 5 out of the 6 dwellings being provided within this site, and the 6th dwelling shall be accessed directly from the road to the north. This site is to be made up of 3 5-bed dwellings, 3 of which are 3-storey and 4 2-bed This site is to be made up of 3 5-bed 3-storey dwellings and 3 4-bed 2-storey dwellings and associated double garages to serve each dwelling. House types have been specified, with 5 out of the 6 dwellings being finished in reconstituted stone and the 6th dwelling being finished in painted coloured render with brick or stone trims and a brick or stone porch. The 5-bed dwellings shall have cedar cladding on the rear single-storey element, and the roofs shall be artificial slate. The pitch roof garages are to be finished in render. Each plot is to be served with 2 parking spaces and private amenity space. The dwellings are to be connected to the main sewage network, with surface water being dealt with via a sustainable drainage system. Whilst the supporting plans for this application reference the location of some foul and SUDS features, both the foul and surface water elements to serve the site are dealt with under a separate application, which has been approved by the authority under planning reference 23/4/22414/FUL. A separate SAB application is also being dealt with via the SAB authority at Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council. In terms of the principle of the development, the site has been allocated for 6 dwellings within the settlement limits of Pont Sticyll. Therefore, we are happy that the principle of the development is sound and acceptable. The scale and layout of the development utilises the site well, whilst incorporating necessary drainage features and an appropriate access and estate road to serve the entire site. The layout of the dwellings creates a natural surveillance throughout the site with an appropriate distance from nearby properties. In terms of the house mix for the site is to be made up of 3 5-bed dwellings and 2 4-bed dwellings. The agent has specified the reasons for this mix of dwellings, which include this area of the overall site benefits from the most attractive views down the valley to the southwest, as well as views to the south over the adjoining fields. This part of the site is also considered to be the quietest part of the site, with no passing traffic, meaning the most attractive part of the site to residing. In addition to these reasons, the agent also states that Site B is the smallest of the sites, which is the site next door, and therefore smaller dwellings have been incorporated into that section of the site, and therefore a good mix of dwellings has been provided within the wider site. The slide on your screen just outlines the total house mix for the 3 sites. So in terms of the house mix, you've got 5 3-beds, 10 4-beds and 3 5-bed dwellings. Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council have confirmed that the proposed house mix specified for this application are acceptable in line with the housing need for the area. Just go through. The site follows much of the same design and finishes as the other 2 sites already approved, although this site does include some further additions to the design and materials palette like cedar cladding and dormer windows, which heightens the design slightly. In terms of the immediate area, there are stone and rendered finished properties to the north, which, if you can see, so you've got rendered property here. The site, the cul-de-sac that's closest is known as Pen y Garn, which is a brick, sort of mix of brick and timber-clad properties. You've got this property here known as Aquarius, which is a stone finished property, and these 2 properties to the north, fairly new builds, are a mix of stone and render. There are elements of the design and materials of this development that echo the surrounding environment and the varied context of the other houses within the vicinity, and therefore in this instance is considered acceptable in relation to the context of the whole site and wider settlement. It is, however, considered the submission of material detail and all hard boundary treatments to be used throughout the site is required through an appropriately worded planning condition to ensure they are fully appropriate for use within the site in the context of the wider settlement. In terms of sustainability, it is noted that the scheme does not include renewable energy forms within the site. As outlined in the report, the building regulations requirements have been tightened recently and therefore require all new builds to conform to much higher energy performance standards. In order to comply with much of these standards, the move away from fossil fuels will be required, as well as installing solar PV panels. Therefore, at this time, we have not considered necessary to insist on a renewable energy scheme. It should also be noted that we are not removing permitted development rights for the dwellings. Therefore, this would allow homeowners to install elements of renewable energy without obtaining planning permission. In terms of neighbour amenity, the application has been the subject of a number of objections, including a signed petition with 93 signatures opposing the development. It should be noted that there is a requirement under policy SLP3 of the Local Development Plan requiring the developer to develop a design and nature of the scheme in collaboration with the local community through appropriate engagement. The developer carried out this engagement, which generated one phone call from a local resident with no objections raised by any other third parties or the local community council. The objection reasons submitted through this application relate to the highways and drainage infrastructure being incapable of accommodating the development. There is limited public transport serving the village, and there is no shop or school. Concerns have also been raised regarding the development creating an unsustainable community and in turn being unaffordable for young residents. The development is said to be detrimental to the special qualities of the national park and cannot be justified with the environmental impact not being fully explored. Whilst these concerns have been considered through the application determination, much of these comments do relate to the principle of the development of the site, which has been established through the site allocation process. Appropriate consultees have also considered the development and have raised no objection in relation to highway issues and drainage infrastructure. Nevertheless, in terms of neighbour amenity impact, a condition requiring appropriate working hours has been applied to ensure there is little impact upon the neighbouring residents during the construction phase of the development. In terms of ecology, there has been extensive consultations carried out throughout the application, along with numerous versions of landscaping proposals and biodiversity enhancement measures. The ecologist has considered the impact of the development on nearby designated sites, including various SSSIs and a nearby cave system, along with the impact on protected and important species. No objection to the scheme has been received, and the most recent plans received are considered acceptable and therefore subject to the conditions outlined in the report. The scheme is considered acceptable in relation to ecology. Members may recall that when the other applications were brought, that this application was held back due to further information being required with regards to archaeology. And now throughout the application, it has been outlined that there is the possible alignment of a Roman road located bordering the site. In addition, there are a number of designated and undesignated heritage assets that have been recorded within the environs of the site, including St Gwynog's Church and Cae Byrddid Mott. The site also has potential to have been the area in which the Battle of Maes Fenner occurred. As a result of this, investigation works were requested in the form of a desk-based assessment. This work has been undertaken, which highlighted the uncertainty regarding the archaeological resource of the area. As the development site is located adjacent to the proposed alignment of a Roman road and a medieval battlefield being within the wider vicinity, a programme of archaeological monitoring and recording in the form of a watching brief is required, and a condition shall be imposed on the consent requiring this work to be undertaken to ensure that any remains of archaeological significance that may be disturbed in the course of the work are excavated, recorded and reported accordingly. To conclude, the level of detail included within this application, along with the various revisions to the plans and information to support the application, it is considered to be acceptable in relation to the policies set out in the Local Development Plan, along with ecology, highways, archaeology and residential amenity. Therefore, the recommendation is that powers be delegated to the Director of Planning and Place to grant planning permission subject to the conditions listed in the report, together with the revised highways planning condition that was read out at the start of the presentation. Just to finish off, I was just going to run through a couple of slides that have just got a couple of photos of the site itself, sort of looking from the neighbouring sites. So this photograph here, is sort of looking from the southern end of sort of the neighbouring site, really looking up, so you can see the sort of existing built form that's currently on the site. Just a sort of closer up view here. And this is the view from Vayner Road to the north, so you can't actually see this site from the road itself. This is Pont Sticyll House here, which the applicant currently resides in. Again, just some more photos, really, just showing the sort of surrounding landscape of the site, sort of outlining the agent's reasons, really, for this site being the sort of nicer spot, really, to reside in. You've got the surrounding landscape immediately adjacent. This photograph here is down the sort of what will be the road, which is accessed. The one dwelling will be accessed to. This is how you currently access Site C, down to the gated entrance. Again, just another photo of the surrounding area. These photos here, it's obviously quite difficult to, I couldn't get access into the site itself, but this is the current existing gated access into the site, and you can just see some of the existing paraphernalia that's currently on site. I was just going to point out on this photograph here, you can see the sort of an established hedgerow, and it's sort of you've got the wall that runs down here, you've got the gated entrance just sort of where my cursor is, and then a hedgerow sort of continues on along, which is the right of way, which I believe is sort of identified as the alignment of the Roman road. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Lisa. Perhaps you could stop sharing your screen. We could move into our discussion time. First of all, before we get into debating the merits of the application, members, are there any matters that you would like Lisa to firm in on? I think it was a very comprehensive and good presentation. Thank you, Lisa, for that. Just one thing I'd like just to mention, showing up on our drawing of the landscaping, the sort of southwestern boundary. I think last time we looked at the other two sites, we added a condition, didn't we, for landscaping alongside the boundary. And I'm just wondering about that boundary, which shows on the plan no trees along there particularly. I just wondered, Lisa, is there landscaping along that southwestern edge of the site? And if so, there aren't any trees shown. Is there a reason for that? Thank you.
Yeah, that's no problem. I think on the landscaping plan that's included in the report, it's very faint, but it actually the red outline runs fairly tight to two of the plots and a garage. So it's understood that that'll form hard landscaping by assumed a garden boundary fence. So we'll have detail of that hard landscaping as part of the condition that's included in the report. So it's assumed that you wouldn't potentially plant trees along that is obviously very close to where they're proposing the houses. So it's assumed that will be a hard landscaped boundary along there.
All right, thank you. I mean, it's a very rural situation, and to have sort of domestic suburban kind of fences along there, along a whole length, might not be a very particularly nice thing to have. So if we can soften that edge, I think that would be great. But so if you've got a condition, then no doubt you can negotiate on that. Any other members like to raise any issues? John Hunt.
I'd like some guidance from you, please, Chair. In light of what we've heard on the no inclusion of affordable houses in the scheme, I'd like to know what permits it does. Am I allowed to vote against something on that basis?
Well, you're allowed to vote against it, but I think it would be helpful probably for our planning officers just to advise you what the situation on affordable housing is in relation to our local development plan and in relation to what Merthyr Tydfil council have commented through their planners, because clearly you can vote against, but it needs to be based upon sound planning reasons. And so I think it'd be helpful if I could ask Davina or Gareth just to explain exactly what the context of this is. Thank you.
Yep, I can explain. So I think this came up as part of the previous sites, didn't it? So, you know, we make decisions in accordance with the statutory development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. You know, what's in front of us in the form of a statutory development plan is Future Wales and our LDP. And when I'm looking at the relevant policy in the LDP, I'm looking at policy 28, and that's to do with affordable housing contributions. And in that policy, it sets out the level of contributions that will be required for the geographical area that the site is located within. This is located within the heads of the Valleys and Rural South sub-market area identified in that policy, and as part of that policy it says 0% affordable housing. So you know, that's what we're making a decision in accordance with, and what's in front of us in terms of something else that we can give material consideration to. You know, we haven't got the evidence that tells us what why we should be taking a decision other than in accordance with the statutory development plan. You know, but I guess what we also have is a comment from Merthyr Council setting out that they consider the proposal is acceptable in terms of housing, you know, recognising the housing need in the area. So that's why we've gone with the direction that we have, really, which is in accordance with the statutory development plan.
Thank you, Davina.
Thank you very much. So John, that's the planning background, and it was seen both from a perspective of the policy and also of the authority which are responsible for housing in the area, that they're both do not require affordable housing to be included. But ultimately, the decision is yours as to how you want to take a vote on this.
Thank you.
Julian, I've lost all, it's Liz here, seem to have lost all functionality on hands and camera, etc. But I did have my hand up.
Yes.
If, just
yes, fine, Liz.
be,
Yes,
be
I
in
can
a
hear
queue.
you.
I don't want to jump the queue, but if you just note it.
I don't think you are jumping the queue. If you'd like to come in now, I've got two others. I've got Hugh Williams and Councillor Peter James following you. I think that's right. So if you'd like to go in.
Thank you, Lisa. That was really lovely and clear. I just wanted some clarity, really, about that that entrance way. The mature hedge is outside the plot area, but do we have any means of actually protecting that that mature hedge? Because with, you know, construction traffic, etc., I would imagine going down there, you know, that might be an issue, because it looks, from the pictures, when you see it on a photograph, it looks very narrow between that wall and the mature hedge. So I just wondered if there was anything we could do to make sure that mature hedge wasn't impacted in any way.
Yeah, I'll just check whether it will be covered under any of the conditions that we're looking to impose a second. Just bear with me a second.
Apologies for the delay. Lisa, are you able to respond to that?
Sorry, I was just
Your microphone isn't close to you.
I
Lisa.
can't hear.
sorry, it was still up still up the other side of my head. I'm just going to pop my presentation up again just to check I'm looking at the right right area, because I think we have got a condition that potentially will control sort of site clearance and any protection measures. Is it
That's it. Yeah,
this?
exactly right. So if that's the entrance to the site, as you indicated in your presentation, that's quite narrow, and you indicated there was a mature hedge. And looking at the plans, I just wondered whether there's any protection for that mature hedge, because that's a very narrow entranceway, isn't it?
Yes.
Especially during just construction.
So this wall here is outside of the application red line, and this hedgerow along here, and the mature hedgerow then the other side of the gateway, which it runs here. So it's outside of the red line boundary. So we haven't necessarily got control over that, but we have got condition 5. So it relates to no development, demolition or site clearance until there's been an arboricultural impact assessment and method statement. And then the condition 6 also relates to a clear of works, etc. So we could that could potentially cover any protection measures that would be required.
It was just the fact that it was that would be. I saw when I read that condition, I thought it was to do on site within the red boundary. But I just wondered whether there would be any incidental damage, during construction, etc. That was my point really, and whether there was any protection we could to make. But perhaps you can't. Yeah,
I think because it's maybe outside of the red line boundary, we're a little bit more restricted in what we could afford protection on. But if I don't know,
even if it related to the construction of that was my point really. But okay, that's fine.
We could potentially request a construction management plan if that we could add a condition in that sense to if that was considered necessary. Or
well, having made the point, I'm personally content to leave it to the Director of Planning on that, but just wanted to make that point. I think the recommendation is to leave these things to Director of Planning anyway.
Yeah, can I just bring in our monitoring officer, who may well be able to shed a bit of light on what we can and can't do on this one?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we can put a construction management plan in there, and you can give directions to us what we'd want to achieve from that. I understand that access is the Bridleway access, is that correct? And so I would imagine that the development will be along the main. When we talk so we could put in a construction management plan saying that we will. The aim is to get the development through the main site road rather than through that small little. Well, it's a bridleway.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
So we can add that condition if members want that.
Do I have to recommend that, Shauna? Do I have to?
We'll note this down, and when we move to it, depending on how the members want to vote, we'll bring that up again.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Sean. We'll pick that up at the end of our debate. But before we go into a debate, I have 3 hands raised. First of all, Councillor Hugh Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Lisa, for a comprehensive report and the written report. Thank you for that. The one thing I'd like to have seen, really, it mentions in the report there is a view from those houses. It's a part of the presentation. So reverse that. There's no indication of what the visual impact is from across the valley. I think Cefn yr Ystrad is the other side of the. Do we have an idea? Does it integrate itself into the Pont Sticyll village, if you like? I mean, that's what I think is a technical point. So it's not a point for the general debate, really. But there isn't As I said, a photo montage or a long range photograph. Would you like to comment on that? Or?
Yeah, no, I agree. Yet there hasn't been any sort of landscape visual impact assessment or anything submitted as part of the application, and we wouldn't necessarily consider that it's necessary. And I think there's I think the scheme's been developed in sort of a landscape first approach, and I think there are quite substantial landscaping features which are existing, which are being retained, and further additional landscaping that's being proposed, particularly around the suds area at the bottom. I think the landscaping plan that's in the report sort of outlines quite a lot of landscaping that's proposed along the southern boundary, particularly native hedgerow, etc. And I think with the mix of the material palette, I don't think it wouldn't look such a stark introduction to the settlement. And I think the materials sort of broadly match the sort of mixture of what's within the settlement. So I think it's considered that the coupled with the landscaping that's proposed, that it wouldn't represent harm on the landscape. Is that okay?
Yes.
Or is there anything else I can?
No, I wondered when I read it whether there was that. You've explained the situation. I'm content to that, Chair. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you very much. Councillor Peter James.
Thank you, Chair. And again, thank you, Lisa, for the presentation. I've got two questions, really. One on the access road, and I know it may be out of our jurisdiction, but there is a telegraph pole or utility pole on the right-hand side, and I'm just wondering, would that affect any other of the properties? Should that have to be removed? And is that part of the actual clearance? And the second part was on the renewables. I know it's down to Merthyr planning that there is no renewable solar put on the actual properties, but as climate and nature targets for Banai are about trying to hit the target for 2030, is that something that should be put in and not left to the purchaser to actually progress that? Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think in terms of the access road and sort of alterations to telegraph poles, I think that's sort of outside of our jurisdiction. It would be for the relevant body to make those arrangements should should alterations need to be from that point. And I think with regards to the renewables, yeah, I think we agree that perhaps there should be some renewable energy proposals as part of the scheme, but also we don't want to try and replicate what would be controlled at building regulations level. But if it was felt necessary that we should we should have something, then we could potentially add a condition requiring a renewable energy scheme as part of a condition. But also we need to make sure that it's justified and that it wouldn't replicate the building control process. I think the levels have been increased quite a lot in terms of the standards that new builds have to meet. And I think for example, installing solar PVs, I think one way of hitting these sort of increased standards, as well as moving away from fossil fuels. But again, if members felt necessary, we could potentially add a condition requiring a renewable energy scheme to be submitted and approved, subject to before the development proceeds.
Thank you, Lisa. Before we I guess look, quite a few members might well wish to support such a proposal, but perhaps I could talk to Sean, our monitoring officer, just to inquire what he considers to be the remit of us as a planning authority vis-a-vis building regulations, because I know the sustainability credentials of buildings are largely controlled through the building regulations rather than us planners. Can we impose conditions that relate to renewable energy as well? Thank you.
I think you've just summed it up better than I would there, Chair. As we know, they're both separate regimes, and renewables is generally, and especially residential, is generally controlled and through the building regulations. Unless we've got a specific policy around this, and we have a particular that we can pin a condition on, if we have that, and so I'm looking at the planning officers on the policy side of things, then it's possible that we could do it. But it's, as I said, planning committees have generally been encouraged to allow this to fall under the correct regime. So if we've got a particular policy for that, yes. But if it's out of date, or it's already covered by building regulations, I would suggest that we don't include a condition to try and duplicate building regulations. So clear as mud there, Chair.
Thank you very much, Sean. I don't know whether our officers have got a response to that straight away, or will you need a little longer to check it out?
Yeah, I can come in briefly. So there's a few policies in the LDP. So there's SP11, Sustainable Design, that talks about all proposals will be required to address the principles of sustainable design by demonstrating that and then it lists out 2 criteria. And the second criteria is demonstrating consideration of the use where appropriate, the application of renewable energy sources. So it talks about the consideration of incorporating it, and then where appropriate, putting it in place. So I guess there is a hook there if members were minded to wish to go with this. Obviously, as Lisa's outlined, building control measures have increased in all. I think in practical terms, these dwellings to meet building regs would probably have solar panels put on them in any event. So there is a risk of duplication there, but I understand that there could be other ways that they meet building regs. So, I've got no objection if members wanted to go that route, really.
I think the point's being made that as a National Park Authority, we are aspiring, shall we say, to very high standards of sustainability, possibly higher standards beyond what building regs. I guess when the LDP was put together, it was aspiring to do something more than the current building regs at the time would have done. So in that sense, I don't think it would be unreasonable, given we have a condition relating to sustainability, if members were of a mind to go that step further, and that would be acceptable for us to do on the basis of what you suggested. Does that sound sensible? But obviously we'd need to make sure members were happy that we did impose such a condition. So shall we add that to the list of conditions that we need to take a vote on at the stage where we come to make an overall decision? I've got 2 other hands raised. No, sorry, I got Councillor Roderick. Your hand raised.
Yes, Councillor Hugh Williams is.
Oh, right, sorry. Councillor Hugh Williams, I think. Yeah, sorry, Councillor Williams.
Yeah, it's a legacy hand. I apologise.
Yeah, I thought it probably was. Councillor Peter Baldwin. Then I think you're probably first in the queue. Sorry about that.
Thanks very much, Chair. Yeah, excellent report, Lisa. Just elaborate a bit on what Professor John Hunt mentioned about affordable housing. Now, I understand none of these 3 sections of SP6 put on them, but it'd be interesting to find out going forward what Merthyr's LDP is and how much of that area is excluded from affordable housing. That'd be something I'd like to get feedback outside this meeting. If like I said, I'm not saying you could do it this minute, but it'd be interesting to see, if there is any in that area that's down for affordable housing, because naturally young people starting off need to start in life, and they'd like to live in a nice area as well. So I think that should be looked at going forward rather than just this particular site, if that could be done, please.
Thank you, Councillor Baldwin. I don't know whether any of the officers want to comment on that. Obviously, the LDP for Merthyr and adjoining authorities only comes up to our boundary. So what might apply to the Merthyr side of the boundary might be slightly different from what applies within the national park, even though it's within Merthyr Tydfil Borough Council. But I do take your point. We do need to have joined up thinking. Unfortunately, the progress on LDPs is very different between different authorities. So one up-to-date LDP might be relating very closely to another LDP which might be a few years out of date, and so it's very, very difficult to keep these sort of working in tandem. I don't know whether officers want to add any comments on that. Davina?
Yeah, I could just add, I think that's precisely the reason we consulted Merthyr for comment on the housing needs side of things. You know, yes, they're developing their local development plan for the area of land that's within their local planning authority area. That they may have evidence that sits behind those policies that extend beyond on their boundary, but you know, that's precisely why we asked for their comment, and their comment suggested to us that the proposal was appropriate in regards to housing needs. So, but we'll continue the dialogue.
Thank you very much. Councillor Roderick, I think you had your hand raised a while ago. Did you still want to come in at this point?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm sorry it's disappeared. I must have touched the wrong button. Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, again, thank you, Lisa. Obviously, a very comprehensive report then. Just point 3, I would definitely personally support the need for the solar panels, etc., because we have criticised, and there has been criticism made locally regarding the development at the top of Brecon, where a lot of houses have been erected and no solar panels put in any way, shape, or form. And I think, you know, the way it's looking, and the way government wishes us to go, we need to be supporting that, I think. The other point, which is just a point which I raised last time, actually, knowing Bonstickit pretty well, although I can see the design of these houses, there is quite a mixture there, but I think we need the advice to planners. Let's look at different designs of these houses because virtually every house in Bonstickit is of a different design, shape, and heritage which has been. And I think, you know, it's a legacy we want to leave down the road. People will be looking, well, who gave the planning permission for that? Lots of little houses looking like boxes. We need to get that point over to planners, I think, and us as planning authorities, I think we need to be supporting that. At least we're leaving a legacy of that. And from an agricultural point of view, seeing all that ragwood in the field there, I would be definitely worried, Chair, because if any horses got any near that, they wouldn't be around much longer after. But that is all I have, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Roderick. Well, we're moving now into that time where we discuss the merits of the application. And so, members, have you got any concerns, any views? We have the officer recommendation, which is on page 32, which is to approve this subject to conditions. But clearly, we need to make sure we're happy with that recommendation to us. So, Councillor Edwin Roderick, I don't know, is that an old hand or is that a new hand?
No, it's a new hand. I would be quite happy to propose that we support the officer recommendations on this, that it be permitted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Roderick. We have Councillor Hugh Williams, I think.
Or is it Edward Jones? I'm willing to go if Ed wants to go.
Oh, sorry, Edwards.
I was just happy to second it, to be honest with you. That's what I was going to
Oh,
say.
thank you very much, Councillor Jones. Before we go to a vote, we've got a proposer and a seconder. If people have concerns, this is the time to express those. So, Councillor Williams.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Lisa, can you just expand again? There's a lot of archaeological interest in this site. There's a Roman road, and there is perhaps a site, a battle site, or what have you. I mean, there's a watching brief to be kept on this site as the dig progresses. And what would happen? Would it prevent the dig, the development, or is it just it would be recorded, or what? Because it does seem could be a very interesting parcel of land.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a qualified archaeologist, but obviously I've spoken with our archaeologist, in quite great depth, and yes, the site does have some quite interesting archaeological interest, particularly with the Roman road, and particularly I think when they did the desk-based assessment, I think there was some sort of remnants of what would have been used at the time of a battle, which is obviously what's triggered the need to have this watch and brief condition. I think it's unlikely that something so detrimental would be found to halt the development. But obviously, it's to make sure that if anything is of significance that is found, that it's appropriately taken from there and is put in a place where obviously it can be restored and recorded for years to come, really. But I'm not sure whether there would be anything that would halt the development, but that's potentially something that I could get some more information on. But I think that's what the conclusion of our archaeologist has come to, that a watching brief is considered to be enough. Obviously, an archaeologist will be on site at the time of digging, and then obviously should anything be found, appropriate steps will be found, and I think we would be kept up to date should anything significant be found.
Okay, thank you. No, I'm just noting it because there was a significant skirmish in that area, and if this is the site, I think it is of significance. That's just from my own interest. I'm not an archaeologist, but if that was found to be the site, I think it would be significant, and perhaps that's more of a comment than anything else. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. John Hunt, your hand is raised.
Thank you, Chair. Following Hugh's point, are all the archaeological inputs desk study based, or have there be no trial pits or theoretical thoughts rather than evidence? And you say that there'll be an archaeologist on site during any phase of construction. That's something funded by the developer, presumably. I would hope there was an archaeologist there for all excavations. It does sound important. Thank you.
Yeah, so the developer would fund the archaeological work, and obviously has done on the desk-based assessments that have been carried out to date. And yet, any the watching brief that's required, so monitoring and recording of the excavation works that go on, that would all be funded by the developer, and obviously the appropriate information then that's found would be submitted to us, and obviously then it would get what should something be found, that would be obviously sent to the appropriate place for recording.
Thank you very much. I can't see any other hands raised now, so the recommendation on page 32 to approve subject to the conditions set out has now been proposed and seconded. But before we get to that vote, I think we need to cover those three potential additional conditions, the first of which was presented to us by the officers at the beginning of the meeting. But there's also the two conditions, as I recall them. First of all was relation to construction access along the bridleway, and the second one was about renewable energy and the lack of solar panels on the site. Have we got any draft conditions available to cover those items, or are these things that we should leave to the Director of Planning and Place as delegated items to add to the reasons and conditions subsequent to this meeting?
I've got a draft recommendation to include reference to these conditions being delegated to the Director of Planning and Place to agree the final wording in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair. So I've got that draft. Do you want me to read?
Thank you very much. Well, yes, it probably would be a good thing. I think we should read them out. I think then members, if any members are unhappy with any of those, they should let us know at that stage. And then we want to take a vote on the whole recommendation based on those being included within the recommendation. But clearly I need to just check with Councillor Roderick and Councillor Jones just to make sure they're both happy to propose and second the recommendations with those additional conditions. I just want to make sure we complete this thoroughly. So perhaps you'd like to read those conditions to us first of all, Davina. Thank you.
Well, I'll read out the recommendation as I've got it drafted here, which is slightly tweaked from the one in your report at the moment. So the officer recommendation that powers be delegated to the Director of Planning and Place to grant planning permission subject to the conditions listed in the report, together with the revised highways planning condition. So that was the one that Lisa showed. The addition of a construction environmental management plan planning condition and a renewable energy scheme planning condition, with powers delegated to the Director of Planning and Place to agree the final wording of conditions in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of Planning Committee.
Thank you very much. Now, first of all, before we go any further, are any members unhappy with the additional words that have been added to the recommendation before we go to vote? And just to double check that, Councillor Roderick, Councillor Jones, you're both content with that new recommendation that's been put forward? Hands raised.
Yeah, I'm happy with that, Chair. It's
thank you very much.
Elegant way of putting it.
That's great. Thank you very much, Davina, for putting all that together. So I think we can go to the vote then. Davina's already read the recommendation, the revised recommendation, and we have a proposer and a seconder. So Danny, perhaps you could check on members are happy with going ahead with that. Thank you.
Councillor Ed Jones.
For.
Councillor Edwin Roderick.
For.
Professor John Hunt.
Against.
Councillor Peter Baldwin.
For.
Mr. Steve Rayner.
For.
Councillor Hugh Williams.
For.
Dr. Liz Bickerton.
For.
Councillor Peter James.
For.
And Mr. Steadman, yourself.
For.
That's 1 against and the remainder are for.
Well, thank you very much, members. I think that was a very useful discussion we had this morning. I think we've added value to the decision that was made on that application. I think that's thank you, committee, because you've helped us to do that. Hopefully the officers will be pleased that we've engaged, I think, very effectively with our debate and discussion on this. So thank you to everyone who's participated in it. We now move on to matters for noting. Do you think we need a comfort break? I think that as these are matters for noting, let's see if we can get through those fairly quickly, members. So rather than have another break, let's move straight on to the items. So we're moving now on to page 44, item 6, item 1 on page 44. And members will see that these are the delegated applications. And again, I don't encourage members to enter into discussion on these. These are purely for our information. But if you do want to follow any of them up, then do so with the case officers following on from this meeting. So we move on to page 55. Unless I see any hands raised, I will take it that we've noted these papers. I don't see any hands raised. Thank you, members. Page 56 is our agricultural notifications. Again, these are delegated matters, and unless anybody raises their hand, we note them. Thank you very much. 57, then we move on to fringe applications, and you'll see I think this application has come before us, or similar applications have come before us previously. It's the land adjoining the sort of waterfall country at Pontnethfechan, and it's not within the national park, its boundaries itself. It's Neathport Talbot land, I believe. Do you want to just give us an update, a very quick update, officers, on what this is and where this is going? It would be helpful, I think. This is page 57 to 60.
Right. Yeah, I can. I can start off, and then Lisa Hughes, who was the case officer that dealt with the response, can hopefully add the detail. So, yeah, so this was a fringe application, so a proposal outside of the national park boundary that we're asked to comment on. This was at a planning application stage. The previous fringe consultations that we've reported have related to pre-application consultation stages, or other things prior to putting the actual application in. So that's what we've now been asked to comment on. And now I'll turn to Lisa, who can then add the detail.
Thanks, Davina. I don't really have anything further to add. The planning application that ultimately came in matched or correlated very closely with that we'd been consulted on at pre-application stage. As the chair set out, it's outside of the park, and as I said, the response given relates very closely to the planning application consultation response that we gave. I've done it on the basis of the planning side of things. If there were questions relating to the authority's position, I'd suggest that that's probably outside of my remit to be making comments in that regard.
Thank you very much. Well, I suggest we don't have any discussion on this, but I think it's very helpful to have an update on how things are progressing on that area. And no doubt at the NPA meetings, there may be an opportunity to talk about this in the context of the whole waterfall country and the car parking arrangements. And in fact, one of the appeal decisions we've got coming up, which again we may want to just mention as we go through it, relates to this whole question of sustainable tourism and sustainable car parking in waterfall country. So thank you very much. We'll move on then to the next page, which is page 61 and 62, another fringe application for which we have made our comments. I don't see any hands raised from members, so I'll take those papers as being noted. Thank you very much. Similarly, page 63, another fringe application which we got no comment. Then moving on to page 64, item 6, item 4, we move on to the summary of appeals, and you'll see 2 new appeals have been lodged for development management and 1 for enforcement, again for noting. But we do need to take stock of the appeal decision on page 65, which, as I say, relates to car parking in the Ystrad area. Obviously, this is relating to waterfall country and the use of car parks during a wider period of time than the 28 days, which I believe is permitted development. Perhaps you'd just like to spell out what this might mean for us in terms of our car parking policies and so forth in that area. We've got the appeals decision, which no doubt members would have read. Have you got any comments to make from a national park perspective on this appeal decision?
Yeah, I can summarise the decision. So, yeah, it was an application to use a field for car parking for 56 days in the calendar year. There is permitted development rights to use it for 28 days, so they wanted to use it for double that amount of time. The application came in and we had objection comments from the Local Highways Authority in regards to highway safety and people walking on the road and things like that. So we refused it, largely relating to those aspects. However, the inspector came to the conclusion of allowing the permission, but only for a temporary period of 3 years. So the site is allowed to be used for 56 days for up to 3 years. And in coming to that conclusion, the inspector found that, this paragraph 7, where the inspector talks about it's unlikely to significantly increase the number of visitors accessing the area by car. There was reference to an informal path. And then also in paragraph 12, they talk about the National Park Authority, it notes that we're seeking to create a modal shift in visitor access, but there is no evidence of such a scheme or when that's likely to be implemented. So that all resulted in the inspector considering we'll approve it for 3 years. And then that would allow the National Park Authority to comprehensively consider alternative options to achieve this modal shift. And the proposal would alleviate parking issues in the interim. That was the kind of line the inspector seems to have taken in the decision anyway.
Thank you very much. I don't think we want to enter into a debate on this particular issue because clearly it's a matter for the National Park Authority to reflect on this decision in the context of our sustainable tourism sort of strategy for the waterfalls country. But I do have Steve Rayner and Councillor Roderick have put their hands up. Again, I don't think this is really for noting, but if you've got any comments to make initially, and then we will take those up at the MPA, I guess, in terms of our overall strategy for the area. So, Steve.
Yeah, just a question of clarification, really. What happens in 3 years' time? So is this planning application then sort of defunct in 3 years' time, and they have to reapply again, or what's the status?
So it would revert to the permitted development of 28 days, unless they were to come in with a variation of condition application or a separate application for us to consider to extend it.
Thanks.
And Councillor Roderick.
Yeah, thank you, Jeb. Just briefly, as has been noted, just as of late, Eryri have made announcements that they are looking to change some of the planning rules to allow parking for longer periods. And I admire what you've done, because at the end of the day, we need to get traffic off the road, because local people need to go about their day-to-day business. And let's hope in 3 years' time that it will support it, or we've got something else sorted in the time, because as you are all aware, the Ystafeller area, it is in the height of the season, it is honeypot place and very difficult to get around. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Roderick. Well, at least this will give us an opportunity to monitor over 3 years the impact of this proposal, and it's not it's not something that's there forever. So at least we can take stock. So thank you, members, for that and the comments. And that is the end of our items for noting. So we now move on to item 7, page 70, where we enter into the exempt reports, which are for committee, and we exclude the members of the public. So can I ask our monitoring officer to propose that we go into that mode, please?
Thank you, Chair. The recommendation is that, pursuant to provisions of Section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds there would be disclosure to them of exempt information as defined as paragraphs 12, 13, 17 and 18 of Part 4, Schedule 12A of the above Act, and the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. So if we can have a proposal and a seconder, Chair?
Yeah. I can see John Hunt's hand raised, and I can see Steve Rayner's hand. Thank you very much. So can we go round, Danny, and confirm that, please?
So Councillor Hugh Williams,
O'Brien, 4.
Dr. Liz Bickerton,
4.
Councillor Ed Jones,
4.
Councillor Edwin Roderick,
4.
Mr. Steve Rayner,
4.
Professor John Hunt,
4.
Councillor Peter Baldwin,
4.
Councillor Peter James,
4.
and Mr. Stedman yourself.
4.
There we go, that's unanimous.
Thank you very much. Thank you, members. And members of the public, that is the end of our public part of our committee meeting. And I'd like to wish everyone Nadolig Llawen, happy Christmas, and we'll see you again in the new year. And for members, I'm sorry, you need to stay as we have other items to consider. So we just give Jane a chance to turn off the broadcast, and then we'll continue our meeting. Thank you.